The ghost exists, and so do I. A photographic representation of my own experiences with being non-binary, how I feel regarded by society, and how that is displayed through the character of the ghost. Representing a being that also understands the idea of people not believing you, or that your identity exists, and the idea of being a monster to society and wanting to stay hidden from that. Yet the ghost also brings me safety. Being the ghost, although I am wrapped up in all my insecurity, it's comforting. It's nice to not have to perform your gender to appease anyone and just exist under the sheet. I have created constructed photographs to represent this, placing the ghost in public and domestic settings to show how I feel being myself on a regular basis, going about my regular day. This work began researching into artists who explored their gender through photography. Claude Cahun is an artist who was a pioneer for using art and photography to explore gender fluidity in themselves. The work shows a playful nature of the performance of a man, a woman, or both. Although these self-portraits are fun, they are raw too, and show someone exploring how they feel about their gender identity, which, for the 1920s, was largely unheard of in Western culture. Masculine, feminine, it depends on the situation. Neuter is the only gender that always suits me. Disavowals by Claude Cahun, 1930. This work, an open show of gender identity and performance, got me thinking about how I want to portray my own feelings around being non-binary. A contemporary artist, Mitchell Moreno, is a photographer who plays around a lot with gender stereotypes and gender performativity in works Non-Stop Neurotic Peep Show and Body Copy. The former deals with mental health struggles during the pandemic from a queer perspective and offers a heightened version of the artist's lived experience, as quoted from Moreno's website. Although not strictly about gender, Moreno is non-binary, so I felt a lot of that side of them coming through in this work, especially the image depicting a painted face guard. My interpretation of this was the idea of battling with gender during lockdown. As no one had much to do, it led to a lot of people to start thinking more about themselves and who they really were. Body Copy is work that is very explicitly about LGBTQ+ themes and depicts Moreno acting out and performing people who would be the ideal responses for texts found on same-sex hookup sites. Moreno disappears into these roles, and you forget it's Moreno. It's incredible how from the right props and costumes you, as the audience, can be transformed into a different world and believe that Moreno is someone completely different. This narrative and world building is something that inspired my work. I wanted to create scenes based on my non-binary experiences. This then prompted my research into gender performativity. Gender reality is performative, which means, quite simply, that it is real only to the extent that it is performed. It seems fair to say that certain kinds of acts are usually interpreted as expressive of a gender core or identity, and that these acts either conform to an expected gender identity or contest that expectation in some way. Performative Acts and Gender Constitution, an essay in Feminology and Feminist Theory, Judith Butler, 1988. Butler explains her thoughts on gender and performativity as being in balance, in the sense that one cannot exist without the other. She believes that specific acts are consistent with how certain genders act. An individual action is either in line with that gender or not. Yet Butler does use the word interpreted, showing that although she knows that this thought process and assumption by other people is the case, she might not actually approve or want this to be true. My experience with gender performativity stems from childhood. I always knew that there was something different between me as a girl and other girls of my age. I now know that I experienced gender confusion from a very young age. My previous project, The Performance of My Gender, enforces this topic, as I recreated old family photos, becoming my parents and my younger self. This work shows me realising my own gender by imitating different familial gender roles, becoming the dad, the mum, and the daughter, and by exploring the role photography has in our families and our earliest performance of family and of gender. By seeing how happy I was as a child, I am taking back the happiness I feel for myself and repairing my relationship with gender. This led me to develop the idea of the ghost and how I can use that to represent my gender. Spirit photography came about in the 19th century and coincided with the spiritualism movement and origins of photography itself. It was a way for people to be pictured with their deceased relatives. In reality, it was a double exposure trickery, but people believed that there were truly ghosts with them. Francis Galton used the double exposure method to see which people should reproduce. Galton began layering multiple exposures from glass-mounted photographic negatives of portraits to make composite images comprised of multiple superimposed faces. This photographic technique allowed him to give enduring tangible visual form to generic mental images, or the mental impressions we form about groups of people, perhaps better known as stereotypes. This is interesting to see how, since its conception, photography has been used to explore identity and stereotypes, and ghosts were a part of that. I further researched what ghosts mean in modern culture and found it to be a prevalent figure in LGBTQ+ spaces. Nell Stevens talks about this relationship in What Ghost Stories Taught Me About My Queer Self for The New Yorker. The reading of queer ghost stories became for me a kind of double haunting, laying bare immense sadness but also the nourishing consolation of recognition. Ghosts transgress binaries in all sorts of ways, life and death, presence and absence, comfort and grief. These words ring true to me and display how much ghosts resonate with the queer experience. Especially when Stevens talks about ghosts existing outside of the binaries, it's exactly why I chose the ghost to be my caricature. This then accumulated into my first use of the ghost during my time in Nevada. This unworldly ghostly figure represented how I felt in an unfamiliar setting, and how Nevada is a place of uncertainty, but also brilliance. I began to look at photographers who do stage photography. Gregory Crewston and Stephen Schofield create worlds that are so delicately constructed. Everything in them is there for a reason. I especially responded to the atmosphere of the work. Crewston images are strange. They display a seemingly normal environment, but there's a sense of eeriness to them, a sense of peril, like something is about to go wrong very soon. Whereas Schofield's work is also strange, but in more of a humorous way, and I wanted to bring the humour and the eerie together in my work. For the Degree Show exhibition, my work will be a combination of prints and an accompanying book. There will be 5 prints on the wall, and alongside these prints will be a book that showcases many situations and scenarios that ghosts have been in, some of which will have accompanying diary-style entries. This is my most personal project yet, and is one more step towards the acceptance of my gender.